So the next step is creating the controls that sit in the animation hierarchy. Go into Setup, and there's only one rule when you're doing local controllers. The motion block should have no values in it on the controller or the thing being controlled. That way you know that there's going to be an accurate transfer of information between the two. So into Setup, the way we do this is we create a group null. This null is going to be the starting position of the controller, and that's going to give us our initial position, and we're going to use the 0 value of the bone that's parented underneath this as the local controlling object. So let's add a null to the scene. Double click on that. Inside Setup, Items tab. Just call this one upper lip left 1. And make sure to name this one group or some other indicator like Xform, etc. Parent this to the upper jaw, so this null is sitting inside the scene, and just grab one of the bones and duplicate it and parent that bone to the null. Zero out the values on this bone so that there is nothing inside the bone. It is at its rest state, and we're going to move this around, switch to a left view, move the null around until it matches up with one of the controllers. So I'm going to position this right on top of the curves, and since this is the left side, let's go to a front view and drag it to the right. We're looking at him head on, so right is character left. Now don't have to be too accurate, we can just be right on top of it or somewhere else that makes more sense. So upper lip left 1 group, and then call this one, call the bone underneath it upper lip left. Now that we have this mini hierarchy set up, duplicate that again. This will be upper lip left 2 group, upper lip left 2. I'll make sure to name the first one 1. Let's parent this one to upper jaw 2. And you'll see that since it's basing its offsets from the parent, it gets pretty close. So we can go back in and reposition this if you want to. Stick it on top. Upper lip left 2. Let's duplicate that again. Copy selected objects. Upper lip left 3 group. And then name this one upper lip left 3. Parent this one to upper jaw 3. The offsets take over. Position this where we need to. Make sure to move the null, not the bone. So as we look at each bone here, the values are still at 0. We can mirror these across, use the divide key on the keyboard. So then that's upper lip right, get rid of the _1. Upper lip left 2, divide key, change this one to the right side. And all of this could be done through scripting if you enjoy that stuff. Then upper lip left 3, divide key to mirror that across. Change that to right. So we have the null sitting in the right spot. We don't really need to see them. This is kind of the starting position, so you can pick all of the nulls and set their draw modes to none. That makes it look a lot better. And since these lips are pretty big, we can reduce the size of those, just adjust the length of them so you can see that they really are just miniature controllers. Now these could be anything. They could be shapes, they could be other models you imported. They don't have to be bones. They're just here to serve as a visual cue as to where the controllers are supposed to go. So do the same thing for the lower lip. We've got our miniature hierarchy here. Just duplicate that again, copy selected objects, parent that to the lower jaw. So jaw 1, and make sure to name this one correctly for that. So lower lip right, name the bone underneath, lower, work your way down. So copy that, parent that to jaw 2, then change all the 1s to 2s, duplicate that again, parent that to the 3rd, change all the 2s to 3s. Now grab the nulls and move the nulls right on top of the lips that correspond. Make sure not to move the bones and keep the bones values set at 0. And just line them up here. Make sure to pick the nulls instead to snap them into place. And now we've lined up our controls. Let's mirror these across. Divide key on the keyboard and name the rights to lefts. Lower lip right 2 to left, right 1 to left. So we've established where our controls need to be inside the scene, and these controls all have 0 values on them. So this seems like an extra step, but trust me, it pays off in the end. We need to do the same thing to the curves in this hierarchy. You'd say the curves already have their hierarchy being part of this curve, but we need to add a null that matches those up as well. If we drop a null in here, just call this one sneer right curve 1 group, and we just position this in the same spot as curve 1. The other thing you can do is you can parent this to curve 1, zero it out, and then unparent it using the parent items, keep position and alignment, and unparent it. We can close the hierarchies here, so it just sits here right on the top, and we can parent this to any place in the scene that has a parent with a 0 value on it. So you can do the same thing with all of the other ones. So we can copy this again, sneer right curve 2 group, and parent this to curve 2. Let's set that to 0s, then unparent that, and that will be in the correct spot. Let's copy this again to curve 3, parent that to curve 3, zero it out, and then unparent it into the scene. So if you go to a perspective view, you see that they line up exactly to the curves, so we can parent the curves back onto these to zero out the curves positions. That way the controlled objects match up with our controllers that we just created. So curve 3, we already know that the other side's mirrored, so we can just mirror that across to sneer left. So just create these with the divide key on the keyboard, and then rename them. So let's duplicate this again. Let's copy one of these, get rid of the group thing, and this is going to be lower sneer left curve 1. Let's parent that to the lower sneer left curve, so I'll just pick that, zero out the values on all of that, and then unparent that. That'll stick it on the top of the list. Let's duplicate it, rename this one to the second one. Left curve 2, let's parent that to left curve 2, zero out the translates, and then unparent that with the position. That will put it in the right spot, sitting at the top. Copy this again, rename this one to the third, drag that on to the third, parent that, zero out the translates so that it's sitting right inside that parent, right inside that curve point, unparent it back into the scene. So from here, divide key on the keyboard to mirror them across, because we have an exact mirror, and then rename them to the right side. Curve 2, rename to right. So we have these nulls that line up, and we have these curves that need to get parented to them, and that will zero out the curves. So let's hide the parent items here so we can get more real estate to drag and drop. So we'll start with the sneer right curve 1 and parent that to the curve 1 group. Now it's going to shoot off higher because now its offset that was in the rest tab is based off of its parent, so it's going to be really high. So zero that back out on the move and rotate, and that should move it back into the correct position. So sneer right curve 1 is done. Parent curve 2, sneer right curve 2, zero out the translates and rotates. That's done, and then curve 3, and then set those to 0. So we're putting them back in the same position inside of the null group. So sneer right has been emptied, lower sneer right curve 1, zero those out, lower sneer curve 2, zero those out, and then curve 3, zero those out. So now they're in the same spot that they should be, but just part of the nulls. So the last one, see sneer left curve 1, set their moves to 0, left curve 2, 0, and I'm using tab to move between the different fields. as I type zeros in. Left curve 3, 0, 0, 0 with the tabs. And then the lower snare left curve, lower snare left curve 2 is sitting at 0, and then left curve 3. So we don't need to see the nulls. We can select all of these nulls, set them to none without holding down the control key. That will hide the nulls but leave the curves visible. And if it doesn't look like the curves are visible, it's because the curves are drawing above instead of below the mesh. So you can grab all of these curves and drag them to the bottom of the list, and now they'll draw correctly on top. We won't need to see the curves anyway, since we're going to be hooking them up to our other controllers. So let's save the scene here. It took a little bit getting these objects set up. So File, let's save this scene as Local Control 5.